Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's Mark from PowerSonic and Apprentice 121. Today we are looking at a brand new to our channel and more widely out in industry product, and that is the Polar ESS. This is a hybrid inverter, which means it includes battery storage. One of the key barriers that we see as installers out in industry to making this equipment more accessible to a wider pool of consumers is the price point, the entry point to this kind of thing. And if we're looking at net zero as a whole nationally and really challenging the decarbonisation of energy, one of the things we have to solve is that price point. And Polar ESS has innovated in that area. And this is something that I think will open up a realistic prospect of having battery storage in your home to more and more consumers than ever before. We're going to run through the entire installation process on this. For the installers following along on my channel, I'm going to go into how this goes together. There are a few unique things that I think we should be doing as installers with systems such as this. We'll get into all of that later on. We're going to look at it from a consumer's point of view as well. We will cover off pricing towards the end of this video, where we can really set out the value that this thing can offer. Before all of that, I just want to run through the specs of the inverter and the battery system that we've got here to share with you today, and then we'll cut to the installation process. So first up, let's go and have a look at the specification sticker on the side of the inverter. Okay, so I'm not sure how this is focusing close up with the fisheye lens, so I may have to superimpose an image over this. But you can see this is a PV hybrid inverter. It is a 6 kilowatt variety. So this will take a PV open circuit voltage of 550 volts DC, which is pretty standard across most inverters you'll see at a single phase level. The total PV array short circuit current is 2 times 23 amps DC. The max PV operating current is 17 amps DC, which is quite a generous limit actually. That's across 2 MPPTs. Lots of inverters traditionally seem to max out around 15, so there's a little bit extra capacity there. And as we see these larger panels hit into market, that could be important. We've also got the PV operating voltage range, which is 90 to 550 volts DC, and the MPPT input operating voltage range of 90 to 530 volts DC. So for those of you who don't know, once your panels start generating, the voltages that are measured actually fall away, and that's while they're put to work by the inverters. So you may see, for example, 530 volts in your open circuit voltage, but when they go into actual generating mode, if you like, for want of a better expression, that could drop down to 500, and that's what it's talking about with the MPPTs and the open circuit voltages. Now the output data in AC mode is 6,000 watts, that's 6 kilowatts, and that is 26 amps AC, and it's got a power factor at full load of 0.99. There is a backup terminal on this, so it will do EPS backup. We'll have a look at that through the installation process, but again, that's 6 kilowatts. So it's 6 kilowatt in and out, so you can charge up your batteries from the grid at 6 kilowatts, and you can make use of them through the hybrid inverter into your installation at 6 kilowatts as well, both while you're in grid connected mode and also if you are off grid in EPS mode, which is super useful. 6 kilowatts is a very generous amount of power to play with in all of those applications. The battery type you can connect into this is lead acid or lithium ion. In this case, we've gone for the latter because that's what comes with the Polar ESS system. And then you've got the voltage ranges of your batteries and what its maximum discharge current is. So you can do 130 amps DC, and the max charge and discharge power, as you can see there, is 6 kilowatts. Now, one of the differences with this product to some of the more premium products on the market is its IP rating. So this is IP20, which means you shouldn't really be installing this directly outdoors. So there is some factors in and around all of that as well. And lastly, the operating temperature, and I've gone into this on the channel before. This will go down to minus 25 and plus 60, and lots of other inverters out on the market are similar kind of values. Whilst they will operate in those temperatures, we do need to understand that performance can be impacted once you get in those sub-zero temperatures and over 40 degrees as well. So it is worth considering, if these are going directly outdoors, that you take that into account and perhaps put some sheltering across them to keep the coldest of the winter and the most intense heat in the summer away from your system as much as possible, so you can get the best benefit from it while it's in use. We're going to step back now and we'll run through the installation process and have a little look as time moves along how this comes together. So actually, before we do that, I want to show you the battery element of this as well. We've got these set up in a little data rack. That is just to really try and enclose some of the battery terminals on this. We'll get into the why around that later on in the video, but we've got two 5.2 kilowatt hour batteries in there. They are linked together both in terms of their physical power connections, as you can see, but they also communicate with each other as well. And again, we'll run through the installation process of this and what it can do later on in the video. But I just wanted to mention that at the outset, this is what's tied into the hybrid inverter. So we've got 10.4 kilowatt hours of battery storage, and then our 6 kilowatt hybrid inverter up the top there. So you can see behind me here, we've popped a sheet of plasterboard up just to neaten up the breeze blocks and give us a nice neat surface to mount everything onto. You don't have to do that, perfectly fine to just mount it straight onto the breeze block, but we popped a little board up there, just like made it a bit neater. It's not quite as heavyweight as the concrete boards that you can use, and because this isn't a timber structure, we don't need to worry about any of the fire propagation, so a normal sheet of plasterboard is more than adequate. We're inside a workshop that is separate to the dwelling, so we've got a safe space to install these batteries into. You can, if you want, also install these into an outdoor shed or a GRP box or something along those lines. You just need to make sure you size them correctly for the batteries and the inverters. And that's in terms of both the depth and physicalities of the equipment, but also taking into account the airflow you might need around them. And a point of note with all of this, lots of this type of equipment is rated for use to be installed outdoors. You know, the most robust systems out there from GivEnergy, the all-in-one, for example, they're IP65, you can just put them on a wall outside. I think they just ask for a canopy over the top as a very minimum. However, there's the normal operating temperature range of all this stuff, and once you wander outside of that, the performance can be affected. And that's the same for GivEnergy, for Tesla, for Sig Energy, all of these brands. If you get outside the window of 0 degrees and 30 degrees, your performance curves can drop off. And also the longevity of the product. It's okay that we've got this warranty for 12 years with the GivEnergy all-in-one, 5 years with this equipment that I'm going to show you here. But we want to try and ensure that this is going to last as long as possible. So ensuring we're putting these in enclosures and shelters outdoors makes such a lot of sense. The same for maintenance as well. You don't know when this stuff's going to go wrong. An engineer turns up to work on it and they're getting soaking wet outside with something on the wall when they could be in a little shelter keeping a bit drier. Because we've still got all those isolation points in and around the equipment as well. So I think it's something we need to think about. I know the aesthetics of these things, especially with some of the premium products where they look really nice and people do want them to be out on show, can come into the equation. But generally speaking, we would always encourage a customer to look at housing these in some form of enclosure for both performance and the safety side of things. But let's move on with the install of this particular product, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So first up, we need to measure off the wall and make sure we've got an adequate distance for the edge of the inverter. So we know that we're not going to put it too close for its ventilation. These all need some space around them so they can just radiate the heat away. They do get quite warm when they're working hard, converting solar power into usable energy. And then we've got a little bracket that hangs the inverter on. Now in this particular setup, we're going for a data cabinet to house our batteries, and I'll get to that later on. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. But the inverter is going to live kind of at head height, so we're going to need some containment between those two places to neaten everything up. But for the minute, we'll just get this on the wall nice and straight. So we're going to pop it just over here, so we're well away from the edge there of our minimum distance. And then just using my Klein angle gauge to try and get that onto 0 degrees. And there we go. So we can mark our holes and get some PPE and drill some holes. Double check our distance, spot on, and then mark the hole. There is a fixing on the bottom here as well. There's the DC isolator here, which is for the battery cabling. And this comes with some fuses that need to go into here, but it's just trying to position this so I can mark it out and try and get the cable straight into the trunking rather than having wiring on display. So we can just hold that there. I'll get the top part out actually. That'd be a better plan. So these just sort of clip in and out. They're a bit fiddly, but they do go in and out. And then I can mark my fixing holes with this little screwdriver. And then I know where they are at least, so now I can take the bottom piece out and do the same for the lower holes. And then we'll sit above the trunking. So we can get them drilled out. I'll make a little mark on the trunking as well, and then I can make some holes for the cables to run through. So although there's 3 terminals on this, there's obviously only the 2 wires down to the battery. So come out the centre of that one, centre of that one, and then we'll just pop some holes through to bring our DC cables in. So I brought you in a little bit closer, and now we've got most of everything mounted. So we need some isolation points around this inverter due to things I've shared on my channel before and opinions I have, and also stuff that comes with the kit. I've also got my cabling across, so we've got our main power feed in to supply the inverter and also to take power back through it into the system. We've got our DC string, so there's just one solar string going on this, and we've got our comms cable back to the consumer unit to wire into the meter, which we'll do later on as well, so the system can see what's been exported to the grid, what's been imported, and pull all of that together to know when to discharge itself. I'm just going to run through the wiring now, so we're going to go ahead and get this wired up. I'll pop all of these into the isolators, take our feeds up into the equipment and see how it all comes together. Just to show you down at the bottom here, so we've got the cabinet ready to go as well. Need a little cleanup, nice bit of conduit between the two, stuffing gland on the top. I think it's going to look nice and neat when everything is all back together. But I'll move on with the wiring and we'll catch up with you in just a bit. Okay, so this is some very speedy wiring, but as you can see, I am pulling the Belden 2-core cable up into the inverter, and this wires in on the underside. I'm now looking at the battery cables and the PV strings. So we're using the IMO isolator for the PV strings. These can just go through the isolation points one time. For those of you familiar with your DC isolators, usually we put a little linking strap or buzz bar across the top of these so it goes over the make and break contact a couple of times. This is a 4-pole IMO isolator, so I'm going to do that anyway, but you don't have to with these, is my understanding. So we've got the little looping cables across the top, and then we're going to bring our PV strings into the bottom, and then we're going to run out of those from the bottom as well up into PV string 1 on this Polar ESS inverter. So we have just got the one string here. They're just going to loop in through the grommet on the bottom and then into the terminals on the underside of the inverter. These are all screw terminals, but they're reasonably roomy, and we're able to use our pin crimps and get those in. So the AC isolator, these are brilliant. These are from M2. I'm getting a little picture there for the socials because these always look nice. And again, we're using the ferrule crimps on the end of there, and yeah, there's just loads of room in these. It's a 63 amp variety, always over spec it on your size so you've not got it under any strain, and it just allows plenty of wiring room. So you can see we're getting that dressed away in there as well. And then we're going to take our cable up into the inverter and wire it into the main AC feed. There is another set of terminals along this side, and that's for your EPS circuit if you're wanting to run that to a changeover switch, small consumer unit, just to run some local circuits. Or if you want to just have a singular socket or whatever, that can be taken off there, and it does output at 6 kilowatts. So the battery cables go through the DC isolator, and they are on bolts into that isolation point, and then you do need to cut the cabling kit down so you can wire it through that in essence. I opted to put some new crimps on the end going onto the inverter and use the pre-made ones in the isolator. It really doesn't matter which way around you do it, I suppose, but it just
seemed easier to me this way at the point of doing it. So with these, your battery cables are 35mm squares, so you need to make sure you get the right crimps for the end and that you're using an appropriate tool to make them off with. They are very fine stranded cables, and as always, a bit of heat shrink over those just for some added support and protection. And then we're going to fasten those back with a Klein nut driver. These all will be gone over for torque later on, but this is just a loose fit as always at the start. So we're now going to have a look at getting the DC isolator finished off and the cover cap going on there just to close things up. The Belden wire, I never actually made that off earlier, look, so I'm doing that now. So that goes into the underside of the inverter, and again, it's just a couple of terminations. We'll run through those in a bit of time as well. And we've just got the battery cables now, so they drop down onto the battery. The first ones go on the top battery. That's going to be the master in this case. And then just a little linking wire down from that top battery into the slave. And that's just so they can talk to each other and share their stored energy as a combined battery system rather than individually. And the cabling into these I'll explain in just a minute, but that's the earth going on there as well.
So you should have just seen me assembling all of this. It is now in the rack and ready to go. We've basically got our cables coming down from the inverter to the battery, and then they loop across to this second battery. We're bringing our RS485 cable into the in port, and that comes off the bottom of the inverter. And we've then got our link cable between the products so they can talk to each other. And then we've got the earth that's been brought down and then looped across from battery to battery. So that's the little data cabinet with the batteries in, nice and secure. And because it's got a lock on it, it means these terminals are all inaccessible to people unless they've got the use of a tool. It's ventilated, you can put fans in it, so all of this stuff can be allowed to breathe. The side panels, the same, there's vents in, so you can make this as well or as little ventilated as you like in terms of keeping your batteries cool. But yeah, I think that's a nice solution rather than stacking these up, having all the wires on show. I think it looks a lot neater. These are like not expensive at all. I think it was maybe 60 quid or so. So it's not mega money on top of the job. So well worth considering these with your Polar ESS battery storage systems. Okay, you can see we've moved along and got this wired up. You'll just watch the time lapse of me doing this. It's quite a simple installation process in fairness. And this is where it differentiates a little bit from some of the premium products that are out there, enabling that value proposition to be slightly lower than you might see using something like a GivEnergy all-in-one, for example, in the way that these things are put together. So you can see on the bottom here, it is grommets rather than gland, so there's a saving in there. And also some of the wiring room isn't as large, isn't as vast as you might get on some of those more premium products. So they are trying to find efficiencies at every level. And as an installer, sometimes you can look at that and a bit of inverter snobbery comes in. But really, there's ample space in there to wire this up. And there's clearly marked connection points. It's fairly simple to follow. But I'll bring you in a little bit closer and you can have a look at the actual setup that's needed in terms of the inverter. It's linked through to the battery. And also we'll have a look at the metering as well. So starting on the AC side, you'll see we've got our AC isolation point in here. So our power is coming onto a submain down to this renewables board we've got here, and then it loops out into this AC isolator, which then comes up into the inverter. We've not actually used an EPS port on this. If you wanted to, you can do that. So this, as I say, will go into an emergency power supply state, so off-grid essentially, and if you want, you could have a local consumer unit similar to this just to power some essential circuits, or you could go through a changeover switch which can power all of your house loads, just factoring in that you are restricted to that 6 kilowatt. I say restricted, that is a very generous amount of power in an off-grid state. Over on the other side, we've got our DC string isolation. At the minute, we haven't got any PV to install on this. We're waiting on the roof work to be complete by the builders, and as soon as we've got that into position, we can add it in and show you that in a future video. But we have wired out from the DC isolator and also taken our strings up to the roof space. So we've just got the one string on this, and it will allow, as we said earlier on in the video, 2 string inputs with 2 MPPTs. And you can see there we're into the first terminal points on there for the DC power. Point of note with your DC isolator, there is an isolation point on the side of the inverter, but those of you who watch my content regularly will know I'm firmly of the view that DC isolation should be built into the fixed wiring. It allows for maintenance of the inverter in the future. And the issue with these has never been the actual product themselves. It is the connection and wiring up of them. That is something we need to tackle as industry. we're hiding from the problem of skills out doing this kind of thing if we're just removing components, and if we're not careful, we'll get to the stage where we're having to remove inverters and batteries as well, and we can't make use of anything because we've decided, you know, that the equipment's the problem. Need to get real on that. But that's a side topic from everything else. This is from IMO, and you know, these can just isolate the string across one of their poles as well. There's no busbar links or linking wires that you need on these. It will break the DC current across one pass of the isolator, which is something I learned from Josh Powell when I shared some content the other week. Just out of habit from wiring DC isolators, we was always putting the loops in. You don't need to. We've also got our DC fuses on this side. Now these are the links down to the battery. You can see there's the big battery lugs up here. They attach onto your positive and negative terminals and then run out on the underside through this isolation point. There is an argument with this that it could go into an adaptable box of its own, just in terms of the access to live parts with these. That debate is raging out in industry at the minute with this type of switching arrangement, but that's separate to the product itself. For me, in this application, I'm okay with it for the time being, but we may review that later on. Looking down towards the battery system, you can see we've got our two conduits here. You could just run these down with the cabling. They're all double insulated or data cables, so they don't necessarily need to be in it. But I'm thinking of snagging, people coming along. If you're in a typical domestic property, these things generally end up where people will store stuff around as much as we don't want them to. So encasing those cables and offering them some protection is a good move. I just need to get a couple more saddles to add on here. For the minute, I've just got some of the D-line slightly too small clips around the conduit pipe. That will be changed. But now we're down to the battery system itself, and that's in the data cabinet, as you will have seen. This is really to try and enclose the terminals. We've got the new PAS document now. There is some plastic covers over these, as you can see. However, for me, just to make sure it's behind a locked door, it's not a massive extra expense. You know, these cabinets, I think it was about 60 quid or so, and it just provides a more robust way of knowing that all your terminations and leads, again, are out of the zone of anybody knocking them with bags or hoovers or whatever else might be going in the cupboard alongside these. And also that you need the use of a key or a tool to gain access to those terminals. And you can add fans into this if you want. There's the space for that for cooling. There's fans in the sides. All the way around, you can make this as ventilated as is required. You've still got space top and bottom on these stacked batteries because there is the shelves in there as well, and that layout can be adjusted. Obviously this is a smaller cabinet. You could get a bigger one if you've got more batteries or you want a bit more space around them. It's just an example really of what you can do. And again, as I say, there's a locked key there so you can keep those locked up. So one thing I was keen to cover is the metering of these, and these always confuse me because they seem to be subtly different across every single brand in the way that the RS485 wires have to be orientated, and then also your CT wires. So I thought I'd run through this one just in case anyone has similar thoughts to myself in terms of button punching which way the wires go and wait until it works. There is an actual process and diagram that you can follow. But you can see on the top there, so the back two terminals, they are your line and neutral. And again, it is marked on the side of the product, and there's always the instruction manual as well, but you can see you've got line and neutral in the top there. These two up here are your RS485 links, and that's your positive and negative, or A and B. However, they're termed in which particular product you're using. And then on the bottom, you've got the CT link, which goes off to the CT clamp that would be sat on your supply to see what the grid's doing. Now, in our case, the main supply is quite a distance away from this cross-room unit, so we've used a CT RS485 extension cable to run across between A and B. But I did want to show you, the wiring options on these. Now, the correlation is the CT obviously goes across to your main tail, and that would link around it to measure what current is flowing, and your RS485 swings across to the underside of the inverter. So if you notice here, we've got kind of minus and positive. So the white wire or clear one is the minus, pin number 10, and the one on the right hand side there, pin number 10. Sorry, the white is pin number 9, the black is pin number 10. That's your positive, and if you look on the side diagram there, it shows you that as well. So you can see we've got those clearly marked. And if you go onto the underside of the inverter, in this case, you can see that they actually swap around. So we've got a little diagram here which shows what all of these ports do. You can see that's here basically. But the back two are labelled up as DO2. You've then got the metering point in the middle, which is this one where our wires are connected into, and the CT. So if you're just going with CT and no meter, you can just wire direct for that. And then you've got D1 and D2 at the top there. So the black and the white on this, you see we've got black on the left and white on the right, which is the opposite way around to what's on the actual meter. So on the meter itself, as you're looking at it, the black is on the right, the white is on the left, and on the inverter, it's the other way around. So a really simple way of getting your RS485 link correct with these, whatever cable you're using, is just to swap them around. And we've not used cat cables on these. We've used genuine RS485 cable. I don't fall out with using the data cable. However, the Belden RS485 cable is the appropriate product for that job. And then again, you'll see the CT on the bottom, that kind of mirrors through from the top. So you've got your white and your black, your white and your black. And again, that's just the polarity of the CT. If you happen to get them the wrong way around, you can either put them back the right way around in terms of your CT, or just spin the CT round on the tail, same effect. So yeah, I just thought I'd run through that just to explain it as best I can. So yeah, you can see on the side again, we've got that A and B, plus and minus, and then they swap around to the opposite direction on the underside of the inverter. And you've got to be careful. Each inverter does this differently. This is just specific to the Polar ESS. So I did just want to talk about the Proteus board we've got here. These are the ones we always use in our renewables installs because they have been bi-directional since they came out 4 or 5 years ago now. Proteus didn't see that as a big deal when industry started reacting to all of these issues with uni and bi-directional because they've just always done it. However, they are making changes within their range to have the markings clearly identified, because as you can see here, it does say out and in, just because that's the traditional way switchgear was always marked up when these products came out. But industry's changed, they're changing the regulations to help other manufacturers catch up, and Proteus are going to make those changes in their products as well. Other point of note is with the bus bar mounted SPD. Now you can see in this case I've not actually put it on the bus bar, because on the bottom of the main switch, the way these kind of link together, you'll see they go under the front screw. This is all isolated, so there's no live bits in here. But the back terminal is left empty. So just to save it away in the board, I've just looped through to the underside of the SPD, and it just saves away. I mean, we've already saved space by having an SPD that can mount directly onto the bus bar. You don't need any overcurrent protection with these, but there was the 2 module space here to pop in a 2 module SPD should you wish to. So it made sense to stick that there with a meter and keep those ways free for anyone who's coming along to add in some extra circuits later on. But yeah, Proteus have got such a wide range of stuff that will help you massively with renewables. They've even got a single module type B RCBO that's coming out to market right now, which is really good for those EV and PV installs where you've maybe got type A RCDs downstream, or a shed consumer unit that you want to have RCDs each end. You'll still have your selectivity in terms of your milliamp trip rating, but it gives you that knowledge that you're not going to be blind in the upfront RCD with cumulative DC leakage across your circuits. Super handy. And yeah, they've just got such a lot of stuff that helps all parts of the electrical industry out, but in particular those of us working in renewables. So on the underside of the inverter, I actually put the link cable that runs down to the battery into the parallel port. It needs to go into the CAN port, which is the second one along. That then links down to your master battery. So the batteries are set on these dip switches to master and slave. My master is on the top here. So that CAN cable from the inverter goes into the CAN port on the battery itself. We then use the RS485 out cable, which links across down to the bottom battery for the RS485 in. I've not got those quite right through the course of building this up, but on consulting the manual pre-turning anything on, I realised the mistake and we was able to correct it. It's something that's really important that you should do when you are commissioning these systems and setting them up. Always check the manual and all your connection points before you look to start energising anything. And the process of turning this on is pretty straightforward. So we need to pop our batteries on first. They'll then start to talk to each other, see what values are in there out of the box, and connect together. So they're happily doing their thing. If we jump back up to the inverter itself, the process for that is we need to pop the power on first on an AC side. and we then need to pop our fuses in on the DC side, which gives the link to the battery modules down at the bottom there. And the system then does what lots of inverters do when they're first powered on, and it's looking at the grid voltages and frequencies, the battery voltages, all of the temperatures. It runs through a core group of checks, and it has a timer on there for when it starts that process to count down to begin operating. So it doesn't just turn on and start generating power. There's a lot of checks and safety features that are taking place in the background. So while that's doing that, we'll just let it do its thing, and then I'll take you in close to look at the front screen, and we'll go through how you set this up and what information is actually available on the front screen of this product. Because one of the key differences with this is there is still an app, so you've still got your Wi-Fi dongle, you can still go and view all of the information in terms of generation and change some of your settings and stuff, but you have got that on the front screen of the product as well, which is a different feature set to, for example, the GivEnergy all-in-one, where it's just some illuminated lights that shows you the flow of energy. You can drill right into what's actually going on in your system through the front screen of this product. And that's to try and give consumers control without maybe necessarily needing the bells and whistles of the app. But we'll just let that do its thing, and we'll go in close and take a look. That it's got a little countdown timer on there that it's running through. It's saying that the system's on grid, that the inverter and battery status is waiting. It's currently static, but it is kind of communicating with itself and just getting ready to go. The idea with this is that, you know, you've got the connections all on the underside of the inverter and the control all on the front of it. So you can make any changes you want within the app, utilising that as well. So if you was wanting to go into the menu, for example, you can press OK. It'll tell you the basic serial numbers. You can scroll along for the grid info. So if I bring you in a bit closer, you can see we've got 245 volts. We've got 50 hertz. There's grid active power of 73 watts, minus 73 watts. And the apparent power is on there as well. If we scroll through, you can see the AC output power is currently 0. The bus voltage is on there as well. The inverter temperatures, so it's full of information. We've then got the load again and output power if you're going off grid, so that's in there as well. We've got the PV range. Obviously there's no PV connected to this currently, so that's not going to be showing us any information. We've got the battery info. So it needs to be communicating with the battery system, and then it will tell you what the battery voltages are. Okay, we're now at the stage where we can look to run the commission. So I thought we'd go through that together. This is the first one I've done, and hopefully it's a painless process. So I'm going to create an account first in the Polar ESS app. So you will have to download that onto your smartphone. And this is going to include a fair bit of customer detail. So I'm going to kind of zoom through this, and any key points that I noticed through the course of the process, I'll come back and mention, but we'll do it on a little sped up time lapse. I'll take a note of the time and we'll see how long it takes. So we need to assign the dongle. So we do that by entering its serial number. So the general slowness of this is my eyesight more than anything. It's been pretty quick so far. The dongle's details in to the app, and it now wants to connect to it. So I'm going to need my Wi-Fi details, which I've got here. So it basically, you connect to the network on your phone that you want to put into the dongle, and it'll want you to insert the password. So we can scan the QR code on this using the app to save a bit of admin. It's now asking us to disable our data connection, because it's going to try and connect directly to Wi-Fi to this, and when it drops the Wi-Fi, sometimes your phone can default back onto data. So it asks you to do that, which I've done, and it's now going to try and connect directly to the dongle itself through the Wi-Fi on your smart device you're using to commission this product. Polar ESS wants to join the network. It's asked that question, so we've done that. I'll just grab my coffee and make sure we're connected to it in the old Wi-Fi settings. So we can see the network there. We're just going to connect onto it. So when it's saying it's an unsecured network, which we know it is because it's new, but it has connected. So we can go back to the app, and it should now connect to the dongle and start doing all the configuration. Fingers crossed. So you can see it's running through that process. It's connected to the dongle. Pretty quick pickup of it. You just need to make sure that you've got your phone onto the Wi-Fi network of the dongle, that you've turned your mobile data off, and it basically runs through and sends the Wi-Fi data into the dongle and secures it, changes its password and whatever so no one can log into it, and then it will reboot the dongle, and you need to then reconnect your phone back onto the local Wi-Fi network or a data connection and wait to see if it springs up online. So we're just on that last step now. So it's connecting my phone back to the internet, and we're just waiting for that dongle to reappear. So I'll make sure I am on the right Wi-Fi network. And now it's just a case of patience. These things can sometimes take a couple of minutes just to turn themselves back off, reload the firmware in or whatever it is it's doing, the Wi-Fi code, and then connect itself back onto the local network. And hopefully it's not too much longer. And then we should be able to see the data from the equipment within the app itself, and then make some adjustments and changes through that as well. So we'll jump back and have a look at that in a second. It might also need to do a software update. We'll wait and see on that. It depends how fresh the software is in this particular model out of the box. Hopefully it's up to date, because that's another step that we can save time on. But those of you who are out installing this stuff day to day across the premium and budget range of equipment, they generally come needing a software update, and sometimes that can take 2 or 3 hours. So I'm hoping that's not the case here, and we can get straight on with the video. Okay, so I actually went for some lunch while it was doing its connecting to the internet stage. So I don't know exactly how long it took, but typically speaking, for the GivEnergy side of things, which is, as we've alluded to through the course of this video, the big brother, big sister brand to Polar ESS, it tends to take 5 or 10 minutes just while it registers onto the servers. And I would assume that's about the same here. But we're now all online. The dongle is connected to the internet. It can see what's going on. So if we look at the minute, it's telling us we've got a consumption within the premises of 149 watts. So there's not a great deal going on. And we've got 148 of those coming from the battery and 2 watts or so coming from the grid. And there will also always be that flow of energy in all of those places. Sometimes one of the questions we get asked by consumers who are seeing these apps is, oh, I'm still drawing power from the grid even though my battery and my solar's doing stuff, and generally it's kind of under 10 watts or so. Sometimes it may be a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower, but it's just that snapshot of data in time. And because everything has to stay in sync with the voltages and the frequencies and all the rest of it that we've mentioned about through the course of this video, there is still that flow of energy. It's small amounts, and it's not really going to impact in terms of your overall consumption through the course of a day, apart from sort of a minuscule scale, but it needs to happen so it can all stay in sync. So at the minute, it's updated again 54 seconds ago, and we've got 147 watts load in the property, and it's drawing 145 of those from the battery and 2 from the grid. You can also go and look at graphs of what's actually been going on. Obviously there's no data in the app that's usable to us at the minute. We've literally just switched it on, so there's nothing historical to look at, but you can see what your solar PV's been doing, what your house loads have been doing, what the battery's been doing in the grid, and then more as a longer term overview, if you like, where if you want to see what you've been doing day to day, week to week, month to month, you've got the historical data that builds up again just through the process of using the system. So if you're getting payments from your energy provider for your export and you want to check if that actually plays out with what your system's saying, you can check, you can cross-reference all of that. Really useful. If you want to see sort of week to week, well, you know, we was all working from home that week, what we're actually consuming while we do that, information's all in the app. We've been on holiday for a week. What's the base load of the house while it's just running itself? You can get information in all of that as well. And equally with the battery. So the battery side of things, you can see its temperature, its voltage, its SOC, which is basically its discharge, so its percentage remaining of power. It's all in there within the app as well. So you do still get that functionality. One thing you won't get is the smart integration with some of the tariffs that are out there. So with one as an example, Octopus Agile, where you can do the API link-ups and they'll all kind of talk to each other and make best use of that energy tariff alongside your system. This doesn't do that. That's some of the bells and whistles that strip back to enable it to come to market at that lower price point. You know, you can't have your cake and eat it. But much of the control you're ever going to need in terms of setting up the charge time. So if you want to charge overnight, 11:30 till 5:30 in the morning as an example, you can program that in here. You can set all of that through the app still as well if you want to, and you've got that control to still be able to have manual charge cycles. Equally, if you want to discharge to the grid, you can go into your control panel here, you can tell it to do that. So if you've got a saving session or whatever that you're aware of and you want to contribute to that and export all of your batteries out to the grid, you can do that. You can still make those setting adjustments within this front screen. And again, if I bring you in super close, you can see how it actually displays what's going on that screen as well. So it's really handy. There is a couple of setting changes that you need to make in this, and one is around the metering. So with this, if it's set to 0, I think that's the CT. So if you've just used the CT and no meter, as in our case, we've used the little meter kit there that we showed you. You need to set that to number 1, which tells it there's a meter in place. And I guess that's just so it reads the RS485 data in the way that it's intended. And also you need to set the battery storage capacity. So with these, we've got the 10 kilowatt hours of storage and the amp hour value as well. You need to input into there to tell it what's actually in the system. So that's you just giving a bit of manual input to set that up, and it's all in the instruction manual. Your installer will be able to help you with that. I'm just referencing it because that's something I've picked up through the course of installing this system. So relatively speaking, the commission was painless. I was lucky, there was no software update that was needed. With these, I'm led to believe the software updates are much faster because the file sizes are smaller and they load in super quick. And you know, the idea is that these are simple to install, simple to use, and they just do what it says on the tin. And I think they've just about nailed it with this. It's one of those where we'll have to see in the fullness of time if it's something the market actually wants. You know, it's all well and good products coming to market, but if there's no interest and demand for them, these things soon wane. So if you have been sat on the fence around battery storage and just solar PV and all the rest of it, and the cost barriers put you off, maybe have those conversations with local installers again and ask them about Polar ESS if they're approved installers, what the price point might be, and if they could kind of give you an idea on payback periods and those kind of things. Because with this system, as opposed to some of the other products that historically are out on the market, you know, that should be faster payback and lower cost. So I hope that has been some help. So I hope you've enjoyed a look at installing this Polar ESS hybrid battery storage solar PV system. I think this opens up a new entry point for consumers looking to benefit from those cheaper overnight tariffs and also tie in some solar PV generation. These are at an exceptional price point. Some of the bells and whistles have been stripped away as a result of that, so the app doesn't contain as much control and usability in terms of smart integration with some of these energy tariffs. There's bits and pieces of raw data that aren't there that would be within some of the more premium products. However, lots of that information, as I've shown you, is in the main screen itself. And in terms of functioning, performance, safety, usability, you know, it's all there. It is kind of still a fit and forget product to a large degree. It's just at a much lower price point. So for you looking to get a system like this installed, typically you'd be between £2,000 and £4,000, depending on the battery modules that you get in and the complexity of installing it into your home. UK domestic premises are all so different. It is crazy actually going around trying to give people estimates on pricing without surveying is so hard because they are so different. However, typically you'll be saving at least £1,000 to £2,000 on some of those more the existing product ranges that are out there. So the savings are to be had, and if you can get into that space for a couple of £1,000s or so and then have a prospect of being able to recoup that through the energy savings over a year to maybe 3 or 4 years, and it does depend on what your actual consumption is in terms of those payback periods, and if you've got solar PV, you know, it's a route. There is an option now, I think, for more homes of the UK to have this kind of stuff going into them as the standard, just something that's there, like a water connection, electricity connection. People just have battery storage. It helps take the strain away from the grid and the infrastructure at that level. It helps us be more selective in when we are taking energy into our homes, less demand on some of those carbon and fossil fuels that feed into the grid to keep us all going at these peak times that build up within the network. And yeah, it's something that I think is much needed. I will definitely be looking forward to installing these. I think sometimes as installers we can get inverter snobbery and we're just looking at this premium kit, and it's absolutely brilliant, the stuff that's coming out, what it can do. But obviously that comes with a price tag that is beyond the majority. That's the reality of the cost of living crisis out there. And inverter snobbery shouldn't be putting installers off from fitting these kinds of systems into homes around the country. Because if we are really talking about net zero and decarbonising energy, then that is the thing we have to solve. It isn't about, you know, what our personal preferences and opinions are in terms of the equipment. As long as the warranty is there, the reliability is there, and the safety is there, it's an option we can add our consumers to a range of things that are out there. And there'll be full details alongside this video in the description below around Polar ESS for those of you who want to go off and delve into the brand and what it can do and all of the rest of it. And as a final kind of point of note, the big brother or big sister, however they want to term it, to Polar ESS is GivEnergy. And they're one of the leaders in battery technology and inverters within the UK and more globally now. So they have that backing, they have that reassurance of one of the premium brands who are putting this forward, because they are very much committed to solving some of the challenges that I've mentioned through the course of this video. So it definitely gets a thumbs up from me. I'm sure we're going to be installing lots of these on the channel going forward. And if you are a consumer who's taken sight of this and you think it would solve the problem in your home, my contact details and links over to the website will be in the description below as well. And it'd be an absolute pleasure to chat with you and propose a system for your home to try and help you on the journey to lower cost energy bills, and also helping to work towards net zero with other consumers out in wider industry as well. If you've got any questions about the product or any questions around the video at a technical level, tips and tricks for me to improve as an installer as well, please do drop them in below. I absolutely love that. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you on the next one.